believe it's the planet that those beings come from, Nibiru, that Sitchin writes about. And it goes through the asteroid belt, could dislodge some there, and it also passes through the Oort cloud and can drag debris along with it. It displaces things that are already out there. Well, according to my calculations, it will be back in 2060 AD because the last time it was here was in 1640 BC. That was the time of the Hebrew Exodus. And if you look in Exodus, the plagues and the phenomena, the celestial phenomena that were taking place then, point towards the passing of a large body with a strong gravitational attraction into Earth's vicinity. Now, if you look at the book of Revelation, which is the last thing to happen in the end time, you see that same exact scenario being laid out. So it is highly probable that Revelation will transpire real soon, the events in there. And with the opening of the Bible code, that does indicate that we are in the end times because that was one of the triggering mechanisms, opening of the first seal, and it has been opened with the Bible code. Any more questions?
It seems to me that the men here who have sex with these aliens look at it as a gift, the women look at it as being raped.
No, not all the women look at it as being raped. Only a few cases of that. Well, I don't know what to say about the men, how they feel about it. I mean, men are men, but...
That's right. That's the point I guess I'm making.
Well, now the lady, the reptilian affair, she was absolutely in love with that guy, and she did not look at that as being rape at all.
I mean, were these men actually given choices up there, or were they just kind of taken because something stimulated them against their will?
I don't think you can ever stimulate one against their will, but they apparently, I've never heard of that. They apparently do have them in a state of susceptibility. They've been hypnotically or whatever. All abductees say that they're in some kind of a mental state where they can't make decisions for themselves. They're under someone else's influence. This could have something to do with their implants if they have them. They may just push a button somewhere that says, okay, now you'll do whatever we say. I don't know. But the men, like Antonio Boaz, he did feel like he had been used because they did come to the conclusion that this was for breeding purposes. But he said that he did enjoy it. Now, he said also that he would not prefer that little lady over a human female because he couldn't talk to her. Those aliens talked in a succession of what sounded like barks to him. And he wanted somebody that he could communicate with, verbalize with, and have a relationship. And obviously that was a one-night stand.
What was your candid opinion when you interviewed the truck stop lady?
I thought she had a vivid imagination, and she had done a lot of reading, but when she got into some of the physics involved, it would be impossible for her to glean this from any type of publication. It was too detailed.
She had a school background or anything?
She was a little hick from out in the country, working the truck stop, and no education. And she's spouting out stuff that getting into hyperdimensional physics. And as deep as she got into explaining how these things work, she had this
Yeah, and by her behavior, after it was over with, she kind of went crazy because he was dead. So if nothing happened, she wouldn't have reacted that way. Have you a question?
I'm sorry, we missed the first part. Did these people that, the men, did they know that they knew there was aliens? They were aware of that?
Well, they were abducted and taken into a spacecraft. So
they were.
I would say they would be aware of that.
But I was wondering if the aliens, as I've heard before, that the aliens can make you think that maybe you're an ex-husband or you're maybe a beautiful movie star type looking person, and the person thinks that that's who they're having sex with, when they're actually maybe a gray or
yeah, in my research I did come across some instances where people thought that they were having intercourse with what they thought was a beautiful man or woman, but then somewhere, somehow, they would wake up and realize that it was some other type of alien, like a reptilian. or a little gray type, and some of them even said those mantis-looking bugs. So, yeah, the power of suggestion is
Sarah
there.
Mash whiskey did that.
They probably needed some after they got back to the Anybody else have anything to know?
Any incidents of sexually transmitted disease?
Unfortunately, there was a case that occurred back in the 70s. This was a young woman who was driving home and was abducted, taken on board a ship, and the creatures that she said had a hold of her looked like they were wearing Halloween costumes. They had all these white glowing suits, and she never saw anything but just their eyes. It was some kind of a little band that they were looking through. And they did a medical exam on her, and then eventually they did have sexual intercourse with her, and then they left her back in the yard at her house. The next day, she felt uncomfortable and went to the doctor, and he did discover that she had some kind of an infection that can be transmitted sexually, and it has to do with a bladder infection type thing. They didn't specify the name of it, but anyway, that's fairly a common thing. And she got mad at her husband at first because she thought he might have given it to her, but then maybe that's what happened. But something funny that Don Morley told me is that a lot of times when people are abducted, they're taken off, taken up to the ship, whatever, in one set of clothes and returned in another. And he said a real funny one happened when this man was abducted and he was wearing a T-shirt and underwear and he was asleep and everything. He was brought back in a woman's red negligee. I would love to know what he told his wife when she woke up and saw him laying there in that. Don't tell us what transpired.
Transport back.
But clothes being mixed up like that is real common in the abduction scenario. One guy woke up and he had a T-shirt on that had Japanese writing on it. So he must have really wondered what happened during the night because he didn't have that on when he went to bed.
What was the source of the radiation burns? Was that
From
propulsion system or just
I don't
being
know.
around the people? Or
I don't know.
how many people get radiation burns?
Some people do get radiation burn. It could happen as you're getting into the craft because, from what I understand, heat comes off the bottom of this craft. There have been times that someone had a UFO hovering over their house, and then the next day they would see their yard was all dehydrated and yellow, and there was some radiation there. So I would imagine that it comes out of the craft, and when they're getting in and out of the craft, they get it somehow. Maybe the aliens have something on that absorbs the radiation. It doesn't hurt them. I don't know. Anything else?
I came in late, so you may have already covered this, but what do you get an agenda on why they would be having? Now, I understand, like, when they're doing hybrids or they're interacting with hybrids, but what about, like, when you're talking about, like, grays or having sex with grays or reptilians? I mean, are they just having their jollies, or are they actually trying to create a race?
I'll tell you what I think happens some of the time, anyway. I know this is probably what happened here. I think that these expeditions, they come from far away. They may be out for years going to different planets. In some cases, they're all-male crews. That's usually the case. This was the first time I'd ever heard of an all-female crew. You don't have the sexes on board to interact. They obviously can't have sex. The reptilians supposedly have a base here on Earth, and as you can imagine, if they were here for a long period of time, had no access to females, and here's all these Earth women around, I think it's natural. I think they would do what our guys do when they're in the military and they go overseas. Oh, those other women start looking real good, so they're going to go for it. I think that's what part of it is anyway.
Now, the thing that you just said about the reptilians having a base here, outside of some of the channel materials that have come through Barbara Marchignac and others, where did you get that information from?
That has been in several books that I've read. I can't tell you off the top of my head, but there is supposed to, Area 51, I think, is supposed to be a place where they have a base. In some of the writings I've read where people have actually seen the reptilians in the base there at Area 51. And somebody had told me that there was one someplace
There's a,
New Mexico. Have you heard?
What?
Mason,
The Area 51 has been closed down. Have you heard that?
No. When did that happen?
No, there's been a movie Colorado.
Right.
They moved it up to Utah.
Let's just say this, as that base was in operation, so also the aliens had a base there.
Just out of Douglas.
So what you're saying then is they were working with the government?
I think that they could be working with the government to a certain degree. I do believe there's a huge UFO cover-up by the government.
Right. So how much of the alien abduction and sexual hybrid do you think the government is involved in?
I think they're involved in all of it. Just something I read just last night. There was a incident where a UFO flap went over a city. This was back in the 60s. And one of the people who had gone through some hypnotic regression therapy remembered having like a bloody nose and being abducted and everything. And then she also remembered that the next day after this was over with, government doctors came along and were knocking on the doors in all the neighborhoods and said they were there because of some bacterial contamination in the water and they needed to do blood tests on everyone in the house. And to me, that seems kind of strange that that happened right after a UFO sighting, and that this woman remembers being abducted, and by the way, hers was reptilian, and they wanted to do a blood test, so, you know, they never came back again, but maybe they were just looking to see if anybody had any genetic changes or anything put into them or whatever. But the evidence is out there, and it's like a big puzzle. There's a lot of little pieces here and there, and when you read a lot of this stuff and start putting two and two together, it adds up.
Cynthia, this book here, the one you're doing your talk on, I know you're selling it for $20, but is this the second revision?
No,
This is the original?
That's the only one I wrote. I wrote that one. Really, I just wrote this book because the other stuff I do is real heavy, real involved. And I have to do a lot of research on it and everything. And I needed to get away from the mind-boggling stuff a little bit and have some fun. So I wrote this one, and that's how I got on Strange Universe and did a whole bunch of radio.
Well, you'll let us know whenever your book comes out so we can, you know.
Oh, yeah, I'll let
copies here.
y'all know when my the Bible and Extraterrestrial Transmission comes out. It's at the printer now. There's 500 copies of it being printed up. And those are just author copies that are going to be going out to radio and TV shows and stuff. And after that, hopefully I'll have a real big publisher. Anybody else have any questions about sexual encounters?
What is